Well, the good news is if we understand the political realm, the administrative realm is to complement it, right? So pretty easy, relatively. One, they give advice. We've already really talked about being on the end of the diving board. If you don't know what council's looking for, it really sucks, right? So here's the thing. If staff are guessing what's on the mind of council, there's only two possibilities when they're on the end of the diving board. One, they fall off, they're cut. And if you get cut on the end of the diving board, which many staff have, they don't come out anymore, right? It's just self-preservation. So we're not taking advantage of their knowledge. Here's what's perhaps equally worse, which I see a lot of.
I like that phrase.
Yeah, equally worse. Yeah. Have to think about that one. But because it sounds good, but it's equally bad. And that is that staff reasonably guess what's on the mind of council. They actually politically get a feel for it, you know? And they come out at the end of the day and they get used to that and begin to be what I call arrogant. Not capital A. I mean just self-confident. And so then it looks like administration's running the show because they're used to trying to figure out the will of council. So I call it, they're encouraged. They're becoming political, not small people. Political. They're trying to read. They're not political. They're trying to read the mind of council. And if they're not trying to read, they're trying to talk. We live in small communities. We talk to each other, right? So these things kind of blur. So I think we've talked enough about that, the standard request for decision, the follow-up action list, the request for direction. The second is implementation. I think we've talked about that too. The need to have clear expectation what our priorities are, which we're going to do. The follow-up action list. You're talking about the activity report, right? These are all things to keep the alignment, to keep the communication. And third, they represent a body of knowledge, which is interesting, I think. Because when you think about it, the reason we have staff, remember, the job of council is to represent the public interest. The job of staff is actually to represent a body of knowledge. What we sometimes do is we actually ask staff to interpret the public interest. For example, we might undertake a land use planning process. And we ask them, go and engage the public. Not all staff, not all councils already show up to those meetings. And they come back and they interpret that. I'm not saying this is bad. This is just sort of how we awkwardly sometimes put staff in a position. We put consultants in. To me, consultants and staff are the same thing. They're just your hired people, right? So we actually ask them, you go out, you talk to the public, you come back and interpret. My best example is Jasper. Jasper, it's in the middle of the national park, right? It's pretty special. And we're doing a priority setting session, and they're trying to develop a new land use regime within the national park, engaging national park, all that kind of stuff. And the young planner, really young, just says, and we're going to use Facebook and social media. And the mayor, about your age, an old fart, right? He goes, well, what? And I thought we were, intergeneration gap or whatever. But the reality is, the mayor, when we unpacked it, it was the realization that who was going to interpret the public interest using Facebook? The planner, right? This planner now getting the Facebook feed would actually be the one kind of. Anyway, it's kind of somehow. Sometimes we actually create the role of confusion, totally on confusion. So I love this one. One of the first things that often gets cut is staff training, right? So if we expect staff, it was outside a knitting shop in Port Townsend, and the actual sign said, my wife just went into the knitting store. But, how easy it is for staff, the world's changing so fast, the technology is changing, the requirement to invest in keeping them in the loop, as well as council. mean, I'm just amazing when you think how you run multi-million-dollar corporations, and often the best you do is you get 1 day of orientation. You know, the need for continuous staff training, etc. Well, let's talk about the CAO, the top dog. It's after lunch. Top dog. Come on, we're busy here. Okay. Anyway, most people when they look at it say, "Is the window open?" So it conjures up the notion of what's the role of the CAO. Role of the CAO is to make sure the direction gets implemented. Right? This is easy now, right? Job of CAO is to make sure you get quality advice. So you have staff preparing it, but it's filtered through them. And to really be the political administrative interface, that communication with the mayor. So it's kind of a fundamental role there. We've already talked about the hourglass, right? So that notion, they're kind of right in the middle. So how do we do? Does that kind of all make sense?
I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the CAO,
Yeah.
2 parts. One, how do you have oversight on a CAO? And I know you say council, but sometimes it's not possible for council to have that oversight, especially when you've got a policy where these up here shall never speak to these down here. Because theoretically we also do an evaluation of the CAO, which part of it is how are they doing their job when we're not allowed to talk to the people down here that they're managing. So the hourglass thing is a bit of a struggle for me.
Yeah.
You know, I like the corporate, everybody's part of the group.
Yeah. Well, the more contemporary, because the hourglass is what we call, and I'll show you a bit, but it's more what we call the traditional dichotomy, the notion. The reality is that's more realistic, what the world looks like. So here's the black and white, and if we go like this, and it's the gray area that we're really trying to manage. So there are some defined roles, which most people get. It's the in-between. So let's put the CAO here, and what are some tools? Is this helpful for a minute? Yeah, okay. So what are some tools? So we've talked follow-up action list. Nothing's falling between the cracks. The SPC, strategic priorities chart, which we're going to produce by tomorrow. Okay. The OS, organizational success indicators, which we're going to do this afternoon. Okay. And so these are going to be 3 tools that we don't have to be in their face. We'll have 3 mechanisms to be able to give them feedback and monitor. So this one, make sure, sort of the little things. This one's strategic, and then this one's going to be what I call behavioral, okay? Because strategy is around very pragmatic. Follow-up action list is like, are things getting done, right? The strategy is like so pragmatic. It's, are we meeting timelines and making progress? There's another element, though, that we often miss, and consequently, councils generally do a very poor job of CAO evaluations, okay? And that is, we don't talk about style or behavior, the fit, okay? So in my work, researching CAOs, which is pretty much all my research, there's 2 sources of alignment, strategic alignment and behavioral alignment. So is the style fitting for us? So does that make sense? Okay, for example, you might have a very outgoing CAO, promotion and stuff like that, when the mayor perhaps was, kind of a more calm, cool, quiet person. Then a new mayor comes in and they're a booster, right? Now you got 2 boosters, there's bound to be some conflict. So that's kind of behavioral. You might have a council that comes in and says, we want to rock. We want to get stuff done, we want to do stuff. And you've got a CAO who's been used to protect our assets, keep everything calm, make sure we have fiscal integrity and stuff like that. So that's what I mean by style. And that you can pick up here. So that's how you can get some oversight without going in the kitchen. Now, for CAO performance, which we're actually doing a major initiative between LGLA, Local Government Leadership Academy, and LGMA as we head into 2016, 2017. What you can do in the evaluate, these are what I call these are feedback mechanisms, okay? Not evaluation mechanisms. They're kind of the same. But for those who are doing evaluations, the classic is, let's all hand out, let's see if we can grab a form somewhere.
George
yeah, let's get that. We'll hand it out. I was just doing one. Anyway, the mayor was really pissed because he handed it out and only 3 people sent it back. 2 didn't bother to sign their name to it. It was just like, and it was interesting after we talked about it. It was this, some of them thought the CAO was actually retiring, so they didn't worry about it, right? They just, notionally, they somehow thought he was retired. Never said he was, never said a date or anything, so they didn't worry about it. I think it was more like they were wishing he was retiring, right? And didn't want to say anything bad, be any offensive stuff, because the person had been there 30 years and all this. So what happens is we tend to do a very poor job of them, right? We send them around, everybody fills them out. And so what's happening is more and more people are doing what we call 360. So they're asking, first of all, if we don't have clear expectations first, how can I evaluate? So the first step is to be really clear, what are the expectations, which I believe we'll have by tomorrow. And then we can now check in. Because otherwise, if we don't have that, you're using your opinion, you're using your opinion. Right? So that's number one. It's important to have the expectations clear. Then what people are doing is saying, let's ask some staff. And so these are higher. You can start here, pretty basic, or you can inflate this. I remember doing Nelson, for example, and they even went out to stakeholders, Chamber of Commerce, a couple places, trying to get some, variety of viewpoints. And then having, of course, council, and then an actual session. There's nothing worse than the mayor having to sit down with the CAO, going through a checklist of, hey, people generally find you too cryptic. I don't know. Like who? Where'd that come from? There's no context for it, right? So the richness. So you can already probably tell. I'm not big on the evaluation. I'm really big on regular feedback. And the reason is because so often what I hear from CEOs, never saw it coming, never knew they were upset. It was just like a total surprise. Does that help a bit? So I'm going to give you a tool. We got an app for that. Yeah, I think you're going to like it. It's a really simple tool. And here's why. Right? Oh, go ahead.
I agree with everything that you've learned there. I think what we all always have to bear in mind is that performance review or performance management, using all those tools is, an evaluation is surely not to just give feedback. It's to provide opportunities for self-development or improvement. If your staff don't know, as you said, what's expected of them, if they don't know what the counter is to the criticism that they're being given, how can we possibly expect them to either improve or meet our expectations? On the other hand, if an individual isn't aligned, the fit for the organisation isn't right, that doesn't necessarily mean that their performance is lacking. It simply means that it's bad fit.
Yeah.
And then, an organisation has, like a council, has hard decisions to make.
Yeah.
And that kind of approach avoids a situation where poor performance is engineered in order to engineer someone out the door.
Right. Well, the key, I think, to all this is it's based on a very fundamental notion, and it was in a multi-million seller. It's called the 1 Minute Manager. So, anyways, $20, and I'll save you the $20. It said 3 things. 1, people want to know what you expect of me. Mm-hmm. If you expect that of me, give me the resources to work with. And number 3, give me meaningful feedback.
Absolutely.
Okay? And so, that's the idea. If we're not clear on what the strategic direction is and our expectations of your role, then
It's
I'm
not fair, is it?
skating on thin ice.
It's not fair.
And so, yeah, it's not fair. So, now, the reality is, councils weren't elected to figure this out. They weren't elected to manage. So there was another book. It was not a multi-million seller, but Google it and you'll know I'm absolutely telling the truth. And it was called The 59 Second Employee. The basis was, not everybody has a good boss or a good counsel. So therefore, it's up to the CAO to be able to say, is this the right strategy? Is this the right expectations? Like sometimes you have to facilitate council figuring out its expectation. And that's all the more reason why committee of the whole is important. It's really a vehicle for the CAO to say, we think you're heading in this direction. Are we close? Instead of going out the end of the diving board. So for me, that's bringing all these pieces together. Yeah. Okay. So we did the hourglass, right? I think we covered that. Now, let's take a look at putting it all together. This is our kind of a piece, is that if we look at it, in local government, there are 4 components to kind of what happens. 1, we've already talked about, strategic direction. Okay. 2, making policy, right? A review. And we exist, remember, efficiency-wise, to deliver services. And because we're a complex organization, you need nuts and bolts, like any place, to hold it all together, systems. Okay? So you can see our 4 quadrants really capture everything we've just talked about. So if the direction's not clear, so staff notionally are here, right? They're here. So if staff aren't clear on the direction, what happens? That's pretty effective, right? Yeah. Right? And if council's not here, where are they? Oh, I like that. And this is on YouTube, right? It is, yeah. Okay. Just excerpt that little piece. I love it. Okay. It could be just me, I'm tired. Anyway, so that's why notionally black and white, right? There's a lot of gray. And you were right on. We got to, it's Lantzville. We got to find that right connection. So often when we look at this then, okay, let's just do a quick review. These 4 components. So just generally, what do you think is the role of, you'll be council. I'll have you focus mostly on council. And you focus mostly on the administrative side. So if we were doing strategy, which includes, remember, goals, vision, mission, priorities, action plans, what would be the role of council and what would be the role of staff, do you think?
Set it, implement it.
Yeah, okay, a little more detail now. So set it, implement it. What else would you see happen?
Supervise it, oversee it.
Yeah, oversee it. Now, just going back to the set it, implement it, that's interesting, because that would mean if I'm going to have to implement it, I have to know what you're thinking. So we work together. And, I'm stating the obvious. There's lots of places. I remember when Medicine Hat, the mayor was elected. Mayor was the former police chief, so it gives you a little sense of demeanor. Anyway, and wondering who's in charge of City Hall. Again, it's not about the people, it's about the message, right? We're taking over City Hall. Comes in, says, first thing we're going to do, staff aren't coming to the strategy session. By the way, Nenshi did the same thing. Okay? Just came in and said, we're going to get our own act together, and when we bring the tablet down, we'll let you know, right? And so the whole notion then is if staff are going to implement it, we really need to be playing together so we understand it, right? So staff provide insights. Council's job is to reflect the public, right? Public interest. What about policy? And we could go more in detail, but I think we get the point. In policy making, what's the role of staff, council? Making decisions, policy making. You hanging in there, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Notice I'm not picking on you. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're only going to be staff for a short period. It won't hurt a period too much. Okay. What's the job, when it comes to decision making, what's the job, we're summarizing here, right?
Set it, maintain it.
Yeah. Remember we talked about debate, right? Debate, read the information, get the information, reflect different viewpoints, job of staff,
Information.
objective advice, options, do the research, right? Making recommendations, right? So that's kind of, so you can see how, my point that I'm trying to make, we're all working together here. These are not two different worlds, right? They're overlapping considerably, okay? What about in-service delivery? Well, now notionally, we're in the administrative world. Notionally, if we were treated as black and white.
The council sets the level of service delivery that we
absolutely.
want, and then implement what council wants.
Absolutely. So if we want a service level change, that's us. But you also represent the public interest. So how else might you enter into the service delivery world? You mentioned it over here. A complaint, right? A citizen complaint might take you into that world. Remember, we're all eyes and ears. So a citizen concern, citizen demands, new needs, vested interests, right? For staff, it would be the allocation of resources, efficiency, right? Value for money, coordination. Customer feedback would be your side. One of the increasing things I'm seeing happening is citizen surveys. And probably in the last 2 or 3 years, and I think it's because of this thing that maybe Colin mentioned, that people want more and more, or they don't know enough about it. Maybe one way is to seek their input, only so they actually know more about what we do, right? So kind of a double edge. We don't just want feedback; we actually want them to be more aware.
But if we get feedback, we have to respect it.
Yeah.
Because we did do a survey and then we kind of ignored the result.
Well, be careful what you ask for,
Yeah.
right? And often we don't design them very well.
Yeah.
We ask them, like, what would you like to see? And they tell us, and then you say, well, we don't have any money for that. Well,
You're ignoring them.
yeah, you're ignoring them. So, so more and more people are trying to design mechanisms that said, if you had a choice, which one would you pick? Just.
Like raising kids.
Yeah. Well, you're right.
Also the red shoes.
Well, Banff, for example, has an interesting process where their budget process is televised, but they've done a lot of work on service levels. So they actually do their budget with service level A, B, and C for not every activity, every service, right? And so the people can actually be FaceTiming social media, indicating, whatever. None of these are perfect, right? But the point is they're getting feedback. No, level B is fine, because this leads to tax increase. And it's just pretty dynamic, right? Kind of thinking. Okay.
So Gordon,
Yeah. Go ahead. Bill.
So as we're going through these different steps here,
Yeah.
I think my frustration is going to be,
Yeah.
is how much time in between each of those steps, and when you're transitioning from one to the other, and something arises, let's say a citizen's complaint or a wall of Facebook messages that say, whoa,
Yeah.
how can you sit down together, staff, council, CAO, to say what's happening?
Yeah.
Is there a mechanism for that? Because you get to the service delivery, and let's take, for example, drilling a well.
Okay.
Drilling a well, it's in a fairly public place, re-drilling a well, and all of a sudden a wave of Facebook and all the rest says it's too noisy, it's in the wrong place because we know, da-da-da-da. How can the various parties, staff, CAO, and council, have a powwow to do a sort of
Right.
quick reread and then see if we're all on the same page to continue, or to go
Right.
back to another session, council meeting, for
Right.
example, to decide?
Yeah. Because, you've got the formal meetings, right, every 2 weeks, and stuff happens in between, right? So you have a political conduit and an administrative conduit. So in my mind, it doesn't matter who you go to, whether you go to the mayor or the CAO, because those two are communicating, hopefully, right? So to me, it shouldn't matter who you go to, other than one or the other. Then they would communicate, either resolve it and get back to everybody, or might arrange something to chat, whether it would be an email or a phone call or whatever. The problem arises when an email, a chain of emails begins to mimic a meeting, right? That's the problem child. So, that's the caution. And of course, anytime you get together, that's a quorum. So you'd have to call a meeting. You could request that the mayor to call a meeting, right? A special meeting.
Well, that's why I was wondering about an oversight committee. Despite what we've said about committees, but you're in a project and it's going through the process, the different steps, is you have a member of council, a member of staff, several, member of the public, who would be designated the oversight committee, so if a problem arises, they can discuss it quickly and come back with a recommendation to either the CAO back to council.
Right. Yeah, I've not seen that project-based for two reasons. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. The problem is that it's possible by institutionalizing that we get role confusion. In other words, we've actually brought a political person into an operational matter, right? But there are exceptions where we may have an expertise on council. For example, in Caslow, they were concerned about vehicle maintenance. And they don't really have an expert. So they actually brought two councillors who were mechanics. Well, wouldn't that be a shame that we wouldn't use their knowledge, right? But they were very cautious to do it for a short period to set up the system and then back off, right? So if we have some kind of expertise, I don't think we want to lose that. You just don't, you want to be cautious that you don't institutionalize it, I guess is what I'm saying. So your 2 points of conduit are perhaps even quicker. CAO, mayor, CAO looks at it and then immediately deals with it. Because the committee then would have to be on site to truly oversight it, right? That's what would cause the confusion, if that helps a little bit. Yeah, Denise?
We're very fortunate here. We have a lot of very intelligent people in a small community.
Yeah,
a lot of professionals in this community. And some of them, I think their level of expertise on some of our strategic goals would be, I think, really useful.
Right.
So how do we incorporate them into our process? Because I think they add a lot to it.
Yeah. That's a little different, and maybe I was confusing it thinking it was a capital project, sorry. If it was a capital,
What's the example of the what?
Yeah, which to me is a capital project. It's pretty operational, and if you've got people doing oversight in it, you're going to get role confusion over something pretty operational.
But if it's something like a major capital project, in theory, the process that it went through in devising it, that strategic priority, etc., we should already have that information, so it's simply a case of, let's say some residents are going, well, why isn't this happening? Well, this is the council direction, this is what's been said, and the staff is implementing it for this reason.
Well, let's deal with two different things. Let's deal with the unsubstantiated, the concern, and I'll deal with that separately. Okay. So if it was now a strategic issue, you might want to have a task force to take advantage of local knowledge, I would call it partnering. So let's say you want to develop a watershed examination or a economic development strategy, or then you assemble some people, usually a task force, because task force implies short term, right? And then you can decide whether it's ongoing or not. So often in the strategic world, you might have thought I was not in favor of committees. That's not true. I'm not in favor of probably council committees, but I am in favor of committees that do outreach. And you see what that's about is council having you two outreach to that expertise in your community and creating whatever it happens to be. And so that's a little different. I would call that an advisory committee as opposed to an oversight. Just play on words, okay? Because they exist to serve council, not to, now inevitably they'll have some oversight, right? But you know what I'm saying? But if they're a committee established to oversight the operation, we've really blurred the lines. But if it was a committee to advise council on where should we put water wells and how should we go through the process, blah, 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 then that would make a lot of sense, and you're using local knowledge for sure. Now, the second part of your thing was, hey, we're starting to get a whole bunch of phone calls or Facebook on it's the wrong location. This is what's been troubling for a lot of councils. In fact, some are shutting down their Facebooks or social media. They're just getting right out of it. And the biggest advice or learning for me that I learned was that some councils are determining we will push but never pull. So we will push information out through social media, but we will never pull it and respond to it. So that's, but hey, if somebody phoned, you'd answer, right? If you're getting a whole bunch of inquiries, like you'd push something out and say, here's the study that was done, blah, 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 you push it. But the concern is that if you start dealing with every single input, trying to deal with misinformation, it's just like it's a big hole, it's a big black hole, right? All consuming. Does that help a bit? But yeah, the task force, great idea. Absolutely. Yeah. So, is that kind of okay?
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, go. Last section. Now, I want to make sure we have the tool. So let's get the. Sorry, I should. Yeah. So putting them all together to really go back to Denise's point, I think a lot of points actually, and get something simple, because, hey, we're not going to remember all that crap. Really? Expect us to remember any of that, so how do we get something, and I just find this, if people go to orientations or listening, and maybe we get some guidelines, and then you leave, and it's like, shoot, right? It's all kind of gone and get consumed. So let's review. Notionally, we've kind of started off that the world's black and white. Role of council, set policy, set direction, represent the public interest, right? Staff's job, dutifully provide advice, implement direction, and give some knowledge. Great. Well, then we introduce the CAO. So the CAO just confuses the heck out of everything, right? Because they're in the middle, right? So now they're supposed to translate, interpret, this kind of stuff. So let's put them all together. And there we go. We put them in the middle. And what we end up with is a gray area. So using our circles, black and white, I think we already discussed why council might go in the administrative world. Why? Why might council go in the administrative world?
Lack of trust.
Lack of trust.
Lack of information.
Citizen complaint. Looking for information. A citizen complaint. Offering knowledge, right? Like I have expertise, right? So there's good reasons why. Evil reasons and good reasons. So why might staff go into the political world?
Don't know what's being told to them.
Yeah.
Pushing an agenda.
Yeah, they live in the community. They might have something. In fact, we hired them to be champions for a particular service. So they're advocating it. Or they live in the community. Or they know not what they do, and I must save them. Right? Right? To protect council. Right? Or, you know what? We invite them in because we ask for their advice. So, point being is there's an overlap. So, when we put it all together, here's my point. That generally, councils do not have a place, an outlet. And I've already given you lots of examples. How when a councillor feels like something's going on, if they don't have a vehicle, I will take it out every time a staff person's on the end of the diving board. Every time you talk, I will, or I'll use the media. In other words, frustration festers, I'll find a way to manifest that somehow. So this is how I write off Maui. Right? Yeah, you feel what? Why does he take so many pictures? Well, because every trip you can write off.
It was tax deductible.
Right? Anybody from CRA? Whoops! Right, you do it wrong. No, I got thousands of people who can say they've seen this picture. Okay, so now here's the thing. My doctoral studies were studying CAOs. Now, before you start reading this, let me tell you the story to set this up. So what I would find is more often, so I was studying what makes a successful CAO. And I would interview, you would say, I know a good CAO, and I'd go interview them. And then one day, for some reason, I thought, I should interview the nearly departed. And find out, like, the other side of the story. So anyway, make a long story short, I found out two things. One, the most common words that would be spoken to me were, we weren't on the same page. Hence the title of the second session we're going to do. Okay? And so that struck me and they would be surprised. There's just so many stories, right? So it struck me that something was wrong. And that, number one. Number two, we already talked about, hey, you weren't elected to evaluate CAOs. Don't necessarily have the tools. So, over time, what I did is I worked with local governments and we created a hit list. Now look at that list, and doesn't it kind of remind us of the last 3 hours? Role clarity, good decisions, plans get into action, organizational performance, good communication. How are we doing? Remember you talked about the charter, the code, John? So I'm big, this is like real. Like it doesn't say respect, or actually it says respect, there's one. I put one value on here, it's called respect for diverse options. All the rest, though, I can look. I can say, do we make a decision we've got to implement? See, I can see it, which is totally different than trying to evaluate honesty and trustworthy, etc. So nice. Well, so notice it's just a simple list.
And notice it says the ideal.
Yeah, and it does. Well, here's why. So I learned this lesson flying. I fly a lot. And it was Air Canada. It could have been WestJet. I'm just saying that for kids get blasted because they're picking on Air Canada. Anyway, so I'm flying on Air Canada, and hey, this guy sitting right where John is, I guess a little closer across the aisle, a big guy. And he's just absolutely belligerent to the flight attendant, just rude, right? Absolutely rude. And, have you ever been in that situation? This is not right. I should be doing something. You've been there, right? And so I'm measuring his arm length, and size and all that kind of stuff. And she was just like a small flight attendant, petite. She came up to him and she said, "Sir, what would make it better for you?"
So that to you or to the big guy?
No, to the big guy. What happened?
I completely disarmed him.
She just turned it around. But isn't that so true? That so often we don't have the ideal. So when we're having a discussion, we're always in the toilet. We're swirling around in the toilet. So the reason I like the list, because you could have a check-in anytime you want, right? But we'd have no guidance. So by having the ideal checklist, we can always say, I'm not sure our meetings are as effective, which is totally different than saying, I think you talk too much, right? Or I think you demonstrate poor body language, or see the finger? Mm-hmm. But when I say, I don't think we're demonstrating, respectful body language when we're listening to each other, right? So now we can focus, the old saying, focus on the issue, not the person, okay? Now, so that means every once in a while, which we don't do, we don't check in every once in a while. We just stop, right? And just say, how are we doing? So an example, I think from Grand Prairie. So we talked about what works well. Boom, boom, boom. This is a preamble because we're actually going to do it. Okay. What are we doing well? Okay. Oh, we're doing some pretty cool stuff. It's pretty easy to get negative, right? We're doing some good stuff. We're getting off to a great start. We got a new group. We're doing some strategy stuff. Hey, are there areas for attention? things we're not doing so well, things we're not sure about. How we doing? Everybody got a feel? Just a simple conversation. It's going to get sweeter, okay? Because I can do this in camera. Who am I giving feedback to? Only one. CAO. So if I'm giving feedback to the CAO using that checklist, remember that simple checklist, back to your point, Denise, okay? Just that simple checklist, I'm giving feedback to the CAO, I can use one of the L's to go on camera. Right? Land, legal, labor? Labor. Because I'm giving staff feedback. While I'm giving Brad some feedback, just generally, who else am I giving feedback to?
Staff.
Might mention it, hey, we've been concerned that, the engineer, because you don't have one, so it's easy, is not giving us all the information we need, right? Okay. Or I can give feedback to each other too. See, so it provides a safe place where we do laundry. So it's the 4th L: land, legal, labor, laundry. Now, if you have this discussion and don't do anything to get that alignment, right, that behavioral alignment, so this bike is not going very far. Why?
Chained up.
It's chained up. Very good, yeah.
That's the engineer.
Good, very good. Thanks, Sherlock. So am I. Now, the thing is, when we're way out of alignment in a car, what happens? Wobble. Wobble, you could go off the road or wobble. Okay? You use more wear and tear on the tires, you use more gas. Okay? This is Amsterdam, right? They got bicycles everywhere. And now, but here's the thing. I find when we lack alignment, we use a lot of energy. Like, you're going to use a lot of shoulder strength. So we're using so much energy to get alignment that we're not actually using it to deal with the business that we're doing, providing services and dealing with strategies, right? So the last part is to actually do something about it. So in this case, one of the things they said, interestingly, Committee of the Whole, we don't have enough time to strategize, just talk to each other about kind of what's going on. So they said, let's revisit the Committee of the Whole, make sure the agenda works for us, make sure we have a schedule so we're not trying to desperately call a meeting. Easier to cancel than create one. So we say, hey, you know what, let's try it. Once a month we'll do one. Once every 2 months, doesn't matter. And number 3 is we'll make sure we have an agenda for it. I think that was all 3. Yeah. Agenda and meeting. So by doing this, notice they just didn't talk about it. They actually said we're going to do something. And I think I gave you some other examples. So that's how I want it to kind of end, with this notion that this is a one-page tool, because we're going to do another one-page for tomorrow. Right? We got 3, right? We got the success indicators, that list. We got the strategic priorities. And if we like to follow back on this, we got 3 tools now. I call it, that's like a dashboard, right? And so now we can always be looking at these dashboard items, giving each other feedback. So let me stop there. We'll take a little stretch. But I want to see if there's any comments. And then actually I thought, hey, why don't we give it a go? And we'll use it very quickly, just so you get to use it. But any thoughts? Let's go round table and see anything out of all that came up. And I'll start with Jeannie because I started with you last time. So Jeannie, anything you want to reinforce, come to mind, think about? No, you're okay? Okay. Hey, Brad? Anything?
I've got 9 pages.
Well, that's cool. Good for you. Now I will provide, I never provide them because otherwise people are looking through them all the time, decision-making guidelines and roles and responsibility guidelines. I don't know about you. You do these things, we'll all forget about it. But I'll send it to you. You can then adopt it for your policy manual, right? And so that way it's there. And you could say, I'm not sure we're doing a good job with role clarity right now. And then you can go back to this and touch it. Yeah. Anyway, thoughts, Brad?
Just overall thoughts is looking forward to more of the strategic planning pieces on that, so we can I can start moving staff towards the alignment process of where this council wants us to go. And that for me is just completely beneficial.
Cool. Yeah, it was always, when we were talking about it, it was a debate. Do we do the governance first and then the strategy, or do you do the strategy and then the governance? Like, yeah. Because if you know what the priorities are, then what do we do to make sure governance fits? So anyway, we made a call. But from here on, we'll do strategy. Hey, Sean. Learn anything? Yeah, did you get one highlight there? Never thought about that before.
No, everything's, it's always something new at these sessions. I think one of the things that the staff would like to take away is direction. Give us a direction to go into.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which one does. Just give us that direction to point to.
Door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Yeah. Good. Mark?
I like the whole concept of follow-up actions. So everybody needs to move forward, and then even just with more strategic items, where we are on those, and have those updates.
Cool. Great. And it could even be a counselor on the follow-up actions if you're going to another committee, or the mayor, right? Could be on there as well. Absolutely. Will?
It's different than the world I live in. Going to court.
Yeah.
Where you have a problem and you have an adversarial process and you have a judge who makes the ultimate decision.
Right.
Here it's much more collaborative.
Yeah.
And that's the role strategy. I like the picture of the bicycle because my daughter's boyfriend brought mine back in that condition one day after being up in the foothills with them. They call it donut, or what do they, sandwich the wheel?
Yeah.
And that's an unenviable position to be on a bike out in the bush. It won't go anyplace. So I'm really hoping that we can make sure we have a good deal on this baby, so we're going forward on it.
Yeah, it's a simple metaphor, right? Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Just a couple things. Some people tend to view a bunch of that as black and white, kind of. There's a lot of gray.
Yeah.
But whether or not you make it through the gray is based on good intentions, cooperation, and respect. Mm-hmm. For me, one of the biggest things is if it's not working, the reason why it's not. Whereas a lot of people go to the blame game. It's not working because it's black and white and you didn't do this.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. For example, if council goes, let's call it a line. If council goes by, why are they below the line? Not they shouldn't be there. It's why are they there?
Yeah, there's a reason. Yeah.
And just like the same thing with regards to staff.
Yeah.
Going up, whereas a lot of people tend to, like I said, try and read it as black and white.
Yeah.
And then they attack, and you shouldn't be there, and you shouldn't say that. And it's interesting you brought up the expertise side of things.
Yeah.
But again, it's somewhat in the delivery of that expertise.
Yeah, and just how I think you just need to put some rules of engagement around it when it occurs. For example, I think it was Williams Lake or somewhere like that, where they had a person who earns her living doing recreation master plans. And they wanted to do a recreation master plan. Well, she couldn't do it, but how were they going to take advantage of having that in-house expertise? So they arranged that every 2 weeks, the recreation director, CAO, and her met to do to see how the progress was good. What a great way, And it was controlled and it was focused. Yeah.
Now people view that as breaking the model. Well,
whatever works.
The model's got to evolve.
Yeah, this is Lantzville.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Anything else?
No.
Yeah.
Good process. I enjoyed it. Very informative. A lot of rehash because of my background, but that's always healthy. And I like a lot of the tools, especially the simple one-pagers. Yeah. If nothing else, they're a reminder, bring you back on track. So I'd like to see us incorporating a lot of those.
Yeah, and if you like that, that one page, I'll send you that list within a guideline, so you could adopt the guideline. And then if anybody says, what are you doing in camera? You can say, we're following our guideline to give our CAO performance feedback. You've got a policy to kind of say what you're doing. Yeah. So roles and responsibility guidelines, decision-making guidelines, and what I call organizational success guidelines, that one page. Done?
I agree with Bob. I think any refresher like this is always useful because it reminds you of things that slip by, that you forget. And it also always brings up items that give you pause for thought. You know, never thought of it that way, never seen it that way before. I think tools are always useful. I like the fact that, you know, collectively we're all here. And, you know, the focus is towards reaching a mutual understanding of our purpose. And I think that often gets lost. Because, and especially in a situation in this room where you've got this history that's brought us all together. And even now sometimes, I mean, we do it jokingly, but we still refer to the before and after. The fact is, this is council. This is council now. And I think this session is absolutely essential for the group to kind of, you know, start to really get our heads around the fact that this is a collective, this is a council moving forward. We all have our own opinions and we all have our own history. But we're here working for the common good. So I think this is a really valuable experience.
Okay, what's that?
It was good. It's a good refresher. I still come back to, I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on the corporation. I still think we should have the third person in the room here, who is the taxpayer and the resident.
Right.
We never, again, seem to refer to them. We never gather their input in my way. I think every decision on every agenda should start with, how does this best serve the residents of this community? Because we make decisions, I think, in a bubble. We don't look at, you know, we're always talking about got to protect the corporation and stay above and below the lines. But how does that benefit or serve the residents? And at the end of the day, I think that gets missed. And I think that's why there's a lack of trust and frustration by the residents. Is they don't see themselves as part of this partnership. They don't. And, you know, I have to agree with them. I've been here a long time, and that's been my frustration, is how do we get them more involved in this partnership?
Yeah, there's a couple thoughts on that. One is, we're in the business of delivering services. So what are the expectations? Whether we articulate them on behalf of them or engage them, but you know, where is it that we have clear expectations, right? Because then we can always evaluate the budget and service delivery against it. The second aspect is how to engage people in strategy. In the general experience has been, there's two approaches to this, which is a common dilemma to what you speak. Do we go out to the public with a blank page and say, what do you see happening for the future of Lantzville, like a blank page? And the jury's still out on this. I mean, there's nothing bad about that. It's just what happens is people have these expectations that are way beyond your capacity, right? So that would be what we call seeking input, right? You know, blank page and going out. A second school of thought says we should carve something out as to general direction and then go and ask, are we on the right page, right? You know, are we kind of heading in the right direction? So there's kind of two thoughts. And one of the things that I learned, and it was in particular, you know, I visited this one institute, and the gentleman, this was in England, and he said, you know what, we've institutionalized elected officials. We've bureaucratized them. You know, their job is to be with people, but we consume them reading materials and looking at policies and in meetings and stuff like that. And so this whole idea of, you know, the outreach, you know, the public engagement matrix that you're talking about is so important, right? Absolutely. Yeah. So I think as we do the strategies from now forward, each one, because often what I'll see is public communication is one of the strategic topics. But, you know, it's not an end in itself. What it is every strategy should have a public engagement component. So let's make sure we do that.
In every decision.
Yeah. Great. You get to do this one?
Yeah, well, piggyback, I agree with Bob's comments. I think you've done a nice job at kind of synthesizing this down into some simple tools. That was good. I also agree with Denise's comments, and that's been one of my biggest disgust with governance is right now there's a third party to these Venn diagrams, the residents, and in a lot of cases that only seems to occur through a dotted line on election day. Right. We as councillors think we speak for the residents and we're arrogant enough not to ask sometimes. It's no good. It's no good. And so that, to me, there's big opportunities for improvement. On that side of things.
Well, if we went back to the simplicity of, I mean, we could do the big picture, visioning, or a particular item, whatever it happens to be. And so let's, whether it's this item, whatever the particular item is, or the big picture, right? Then remember, our grid here is we can inform, we can ask for input, we can ask for feedback, and we can ask for involvement. So involvement would have been the task force idea that you were talking about. Let's get some people who have knowledge, and so a task force, for example, would be an idea. For feedback, we would have a product, a draft, hopefully. All people are jaded about this because it's already in 3 colors, not to be changed probably too easily. But anyway, a draft product. Here on input, we might have options or maybe even a blank page, right? We've got 3 options. Like a charrette, like a downtown, with 3 different options, and Whistler just went through that, for example, or a blank page. And then for information, we're trying to tell people, it's pretty obvious. So for every item that we discuss from here on, when we get to priors, we need to locate it on there. And that's what could be on your RFD that says, for this item, we're suggesting a press release. We're suggesting whatever happens to be, and then you can discuss it. The reason I'm saying this is I've just seen so many places when public communication's on the list, and the first thing they do is we got to go do a study, right? Which is, and to me, it's just like, make it part of everything you do. I mean, the budget would be a part of everything you do, right? The strategy hopefully will be a part of everything you do. And so if public interest is a part of everything you do, then put it in everything. Does that kind of help? Okay, yeah.
Can you comment on the official community plan and all those factors into all of this? Because we're hearing that we need to consult the residents, but they have been consulted. We have an extensive document outlining that consultation with the community and the direction.
Right. Well, I'm not quite sure what the question is, but
just a comment on how the official community plan would factor into
what?
This input or feedback from the residents, and that's while making our decisions or strategic.
Well, the OCP is kind of like your community charter, notionally. It could be your ICSP too, Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. Always a question of how these 2 fit together. But let's use the 2 parallel for now. ICSP being the broad sustainability of the community, OCP being the principles, and then you have a land use bylaw. Okay. So that's a community charter that if it was done effectively, which would mean well-informed public on options, input, and feedback, would be all of them, you'd say we have a solid reflection of community values. Wait, when was it done?
2005.
Oh, 2005. Okay. So that's important though. In 2005, that's 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. Has the community changed?
Not really.
Well, I wonder.
Yeah.
Has the world?
The population really hasn't changed.
Has the world changed?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's possible that the values of your community have changed. Possible. Yes.
Yeah. In my neighborhood, there's about 15 houses. Half of those people moved here since the OCP.
Yeah.
So people have changed. The demographics might be different. The world's changed. The region's point is there's change. Okay? I don't think we can probably dispute that. So then you'd say, okay, do we need to rethink the OCP? Is this making good sense? Is this okay? Okay. And it could be very well one of your issues too. I don't know. Okay. Don't want to unpack it too far, but just so OCPs can be approached 3 different ways. One, open heart surgery, right? Just bust the whole sucker out and start over, okay? Second, what we call targeted. And third is housekeeping, okay? Housekeeping would be, it's not that old, and, you know, legislation changed, and you need to change some wordings, and, you know.
We did that.
Yeah, okay? Targeted is where, you know, it's reasonably robust values-wise, but we've had some issues around secondary suites, we've had some issues around parking, and we're just going to target 3 or 4 particular issues and just deal with those, okay? You know, the comprehensive, more appropriate word, is, you know what, it's time to start from scratch. And a typical process would say, where do you see the future of our community? What do you see? What's the vision that would be meaningful? Like, community visions are very powerful. I don't want you to don't confuse it with a vision statement. Okay? What do we see in the social environment? And we're going to take, actually, we're going to do a little bit of this in about 15, 20 minutes. You know, what do we see in the social, environmental, economic elements of our community? What are our hopes and fears? And it's open. It's like input, right? Then we're going to, out of that, say, where are we now? Right? So where do we want to be? Where are we? Doing a gap analysis, right? And we're going to ask the public about that, right? We're going to engage the public. And then we're going to sit down and say, okay, our job is to try and bridge where we want to be and where we are. And with that, we have to look at options. We're going to explore some options because the public may or may not have that expertise. So we're going to maybe get some external help, look at best practices. And we're going to say, hey, when it comes to downtown revitalization, here's some options. And now we're going to ask for feedback. Is this working? Everybody? Okay? Because you're going to use all of them, right? And then we're going to engage some feedback and create a discussion around, well, should we do this or should we do this, etc. And then you're going to, perhaps some of these, create a body to study a little further, a task force. Just, hey, let's work with do you have a chamber?
No.
Okay. You know, some business leaders, we're going to ask them to look at, you know, what would resolve sort of traffic patterns in the downtown or secondary suites, right? Now we're talking about involvement, okay? And I might have a variety of these, depending on how exhaustive you want to do this. And then we're going to put it all together with all these ideas, and you're going to debate it and say, we're taking this option, but you're going to do one more kick. It's called the public hearing, right? So that's the obligatory. So for many, they do the whole process, study it, maybe do one night of public consultation, then put out a draft, wonder why the hell they get blasted at the public hearing. People come out of the woodwork. You want to put a Walmart where, or, you know, whatever it happens to be, an industrial park right beside me. So, does that help? Okay, so that would, now, with that came capacity, staff capacity, financial capacity, right? There's a whole bunch of elements to that. So then I have to design, is it that big, or this, you know, you just have to design to your capacity.
Well, one thing, when it comes to the OCP, is that it's not a terribly prescriptive document. It doesn't say on the street, thou shalt do this. And I always find it interesting that people in the public, they will latch onto the OCP as a prescriptive document when there's things that support their opinion on something.
Yeah.
But when there's something else, it's like, well, we can change it.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's a guideline.
Yeah.
It's a broad-based guideline of which the nature of it, pending revision, you try to uphold. But when you get right down to the ground for this particular project or whatever, then it's much more specific in terms of what you do.
Well, that tends to be in your zoning bylaw or your land use bylaw, that level of articulation, because if you actually look at an OCP, now, some would argue that the ICSP, Integrated Community Sustainability Plan, is actually the bigger document, the more fundamental. And then OCP is basically land use.
Is that our regional growth strategy?
No, our regional growth strategy would be way over here.
Okay.
One could argue it's overlap. So you may not have one of these. An Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. Now, for some people, they put this actually inside here. It's the social, the 3 pillars, okay? So like, so wherever it is, it's either up here, but it's the broadest. So if you treated it like this, and I know it gets a little awkward if it's inside here pictorially, but it's the same thing. Then out of here comes transportation, infrastructure, capital, recreation, right? So that's the idea of the highest order of your OCP having your community charter, which should inform your corporate plan, right? So back to your original question, which comes first? Yes. Right, you know.
So I guess my question is to some of the older council, former council members. Do we have this document? Because I've seen traffic studies, which seem all have been part of that village core thing. Because I've seen traffic studies, I've seen studies connecting up the various roads that like Clark Drive. Yep. Was that the intent of this?
Within the OCP, there would be suggestions as having a study on this and a study on that, which included the village core. I'm assuming it mentioned the transportation study in the OCP.
Yeah, it could have been watershed, environment.
It doesn't provide any sort of guidance as to what the outcome of those things will be. So when you go from the OCP down to the transportation study, then for some of those people that were in favor of the broad-based idea of the OCP, all of a sudden it becomes very real to them as to how their neighborhood's going to change. And that's where you get some of that conflict occurring where they're saying, but it's in the OCP. Well, it doesn't really say my road's going to go through on the OCP, but when I hit the traffic study, all of a sudden it is. And they work it up, oh, the OCP's crap.
Yeah, well, in that case, there would be an intermediary document that could be missing there, which is your zoning. Your zoning or land use bylaw, to use different words, is actually the interpretation. It'd be like, a parallel would be we have a policy, and then we have a procedure to implement it, right? Mm-hmm. So the same as OCP guiding principles, and then a land use bylaw, a transportation study, a trail master, these implemented, right? And so if you're finding lots of gaps or variances requests and that you're approving, then you have to go back to your base and say perhaps it's no longer, so either we've got lots of controversy or we're reviewing and approving too many things that should have been delegated to staff, but the principals, wasn't correct. Then you have to go back and say your foundation needs review. And
just to build on that, when we did the transportation review, which wasn't tied to anything, we just did it, there was a lot of controversy and it didn't fit with the OCP anymore. Right. So I think at the end of the day, I think we only approved one road after the whole process was done. So there was a complete disconnect there between the residents and these plans.
Yeah, but if you look at the OCP being the community charter, as the values and community values might be changing, then a study may inform a change back. It's normal, because you don't know everything. So once you get into a watershed study or a transportation study, the things we learn there, it's like asking for a legal opinion. And once you got the legal opinion, now you know the questions to ask. You know what I mean? And then, it would cause you to go back here and change it. Now, if you find that you're getting too many changes or what we call variances, then your base is probably not solid enough, right? That's what. But there's many communities that's how they operate. They would say we amend as the community's changing, and because 50% of that document is so principle-based, you can't argue with it. We support ethnic diversity, we support demographic diversity, we support housing diversity.
But one that's coming up a lot, and it comes up at the regional level as well, is transportation and buses. Because you speak about working in an economically sustainable fashion, and then you talk about having transit everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that.
So
you meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So the other element to values, and it was all the way back to the code of conduct, is values can be very ambiguous and therefore conflicting. Yeah. So they can conflict and they conflict within. For example, I could say I respect you enough not to want to hurt your feelings if you've gone off, okay? I respect you enough that I want to tell you that so you don't do it again and embarrass yourself. Yeah, I mean, well, there was a double edge on respect, right?
Yeah.
So for values, if you say we value multimodal or environmentally sensitive transportation, right? But meanwhile, we support economic development and job creation, just for argument's sake, okay? Well, often in many communities, tourism is the way to diversify. Tourism is one of the lowest paying industries in the world, tends to attract low paying, people who can't afford a car, and therefore to get to work, they need transit, which then more transit would be the total opposite to the notion of climate change or whatever, So you just see how these things. So that's your job, right? To kind of be able to reconcile. Does that make a little bit sense?
I'm saying a Whistler right now.
Yeah. It's, you look at Whistler. Yeah. So
here's one thing to remember is that these are documents that aren't etched in stone. They can be changed if it's the will of the people and the council.
Yeah.
At the regional district, we ran into a thing about a month or so ago where there was this policy. The policy set the rate for a certain item. And people are saying, well, we have to charge that rate because that's what the policy says. And staff was sitting there waiting because the board obviously wasn't happy with the policy.
Right.
So staff's like, change it.
Yeah.
You don't like it? Change it. It's
yeah. On the other,
but it has to come from the elected people, not from staff.
And that's where you would now. If there was a particular issue, though, we could have given you 3 options, right?
Well, the problem is the board never asked for options.
Yeah.
They just complained about it.
But that's where you would think back to committee of the whole. We could have chatted about it and provided direction to staff so they're not on the edge of the diving board.
Yeah, they didn't do it.
I know. But the thing is, back to your original question, if you're changing something or are unhappy with it so much, that would suggest either targeted review, because there may only be like 3 or 4 particular target areas, and the base is solid. I don't know. I have no idea, right? But, you would have to look at that. And then you'd say, okay, we got 3 years left, right? And if this is one of our topics, you know what we're going to do? We're going to unpack it. We're going to figure out public consultation. And we're going to get a timeline for it. We're going to figure out why we're doing it. But it's a great example of what we're going to need to do and, balance it today and tomorrow. How's that? Anything else? Okay. So little stretch. Come back. We're switching channels. We're going into strategy, and if we get time, we'll do a governance check at the end. Okay?